Welcome to our amazing agents and investors nationwide. Today is May 2nd, 2024, and this is All the Leads Mastermind podcast number 478. Before I turn it over to Tim, I just wanted to thank two people that I had invited for showing up today. One of them will be our guest, our featured guest speaker on the call in a few weeks. And that is David McMahan. He is the founder of Fair Split, a national estate sale company. And given today's topic, I thought he might have a few entertaining stories to share with us. The other one is an old friend that I spoke to this morning for the first time in 20 years from my real estate coaching career, Bill Crespo. And I coached, there he is, Bill. We coached years ago. Neither one of us has changed a bit, Bill. You look exactly the same. Yeah, but I kind of went, yeah, exactly, a little less hair. I went in a different direction, or a few different directions. Bill has hung in there with coaching, and he is now one of the elite real estate coaches in the country. So I want to thank both of you guys for being here. And speaking of coaches, our coach Bruce, well, last week he had a doctor's appointment. I don't know if we got a note, but this week, I don't know. I think his dog ate his homework or something, but I think he's going to miss one more call and he'll be back next week. If you have any pressing issues, I'm sure Ken and Tim and I can answer them. If anything, worst case, I believe Bruce will be returning next week. Take it away, Tim. It's all yours.
Well, I'll segue from what you said to also recognize a couple of other people who are on here today in a different capacity who are joining us from a staff standpoint. Aline and Steve Carney, Aline Smolenoff and Steve Carney are on here, and we finally decided that we'd had about enough of Ken and we needed to get him some help. He was, basically floundering and struggling every day to make sure we were keeping up with everything. And so we've gone out and reached out to a couple more people, and two of them are joining us today for the first time, sort of in their capacity as a coach. And I'm going to ask both of them to unmute themselves now so that they can potentially chime in at will as they wish to. Steve Carney has been on our calls forever and ever and ever, and Aline has been with us forever and ever and ever, and they both kind of represent a differing viewpoint to the industry. They kind of do different things, and so we're trying to broaden our ability to provide you good resources. We've got a couple of other people who will also be joining that group, and so we're gonna really give you some broad bases of folks to talk with, and we'll throw a couple of bios up for all of our coaches. Therefore, when you make some selections about who you wish to engage with, you'll be able to maybe pick the coach that might best be able to help you with a particular problem that you may be having. Steve, I clicked your button to unmute you, and you need to unmute yourself now so that you can speak.
Tim, the first thing we got to do is get him one of those beautiful blue backgrounds.
Yeah, we were supposed to have done that today. Toby didn't quite get to that, but we will get them that. So they'll be girls and boys in blue next week. So Ken did a great job of also working with them to kind of tell them what we expect. And Toby, who's our support manager, has been kind of managing that program and done a great job with it. So that's a great thing. If you notice the email today, I'm going to segue kind of off to that. Steve, you're still muted there, bud. If you can get a chance to unmute yourself, please do. Anyway, Alyssa published a note today about kind of what we're doing. We're going to change our format a little bit. And Alyssa, if you'd like to take it over at this point and talk a little bit about how we're going to do this today and kind of get us started, that would be great.
Sure. I'll say in advance, my voice is a little messed up. I am just getting off the tail end of being sick, but it kind of is fitting for our potentially creepy topic today a little bit. So, we are going to be talking about some of the more strange or bizarre probate encounters. These are things that either have been brought up on previous podcasts or mentioned in our Facebook group, or things that some of our own coaches over the years have experienced. Some of the more strange situations that people might face with probate, we can run into all sorts of different things that we didn't may typically not face in a typical real estate transaction. So wanted to kind of just run through a couple of scenarios. And so I will kind of present one and then have our coaches give kind of how they would overcome it and some ideas. And towards the second half of the call, we encourage you, if you have your own story or if you have your own scenario that you've run into, we would love for you to raise your hand and share your story on live. Let us know what you dealt with and how you overcame it. And obviously, if any of these scenarios that we do present is something that you've dealt with, or you have an idea on how you would overcome it, or a tip or trick that we don't mention, definitely feel free to chat your input either in the Zoom chat, on our streaming platforms as well, or on raise your hand and give us your input live. And with that, I can go ahead and get started with the first topic if we're ready.
Go for it.
Ready.
Alrighty. The first one is going to be one that is a little bit more common just to get us rolling, and that is going to be when you are dealing with a situation with multiple heirs with conflicting interests. Typically, these are situations where the heirs are not being so sweet to each other. They may be battling over the property or what they want to do with it. Some may want to sell quickly, others may want to keep it, and you may end up in a stalemate. So, what would you do in that scenario?
Yep. Tim or Jim?
Go ahead, bud.
All right. I mean, you know, like Jim said, running theme, but you know, you got to build rapport. Unfortunately, if you have 2 or 3 people that are not going to cooperate, then you have to build rapport with all of them, unfortunately. Or fortunately, you know, actually I had recently had 2 sisters and a son, and I mentioned some of this stuff on the podcast, but when I realized the sister was going to be a little more difficult, then I spent probably an hour the first time I met her just to build rapport, learn more about her life, get to know her. I mean, she said she was going to church and improving her life, and we talked about mindset and about, you know, just being generally a better person. And I think that did pay dividends. And she was not still perfectly easy to deal with, but I think that did pay dividends in the end. There was a big old-fashioned stove that she wanted to rip out of the house during the middle of the transaction. And I'm like, listen, somebody's buying a $550,000 house. The last thing they need is for you to come in and tear out this stove while they're getting their loan ready to close on the property. I think she just really wanted to just upset everybody and just feel powerful in the transaction. And basically, you know, always, as I always assure them that they're in charge and we're going to do whatever you want to let them know they have the power. But I, you know, said, hey, this is definitely not going to be the best thing for the transaction and to get us the most money. But again, it all comes down to communication.
I heard a great story about 2 weeks ago. I was talking to one of our subscribers, and she described a circumstance that she ran into where everything was fine and everybody agreed to everything, except there was one piece of furniture that was an old desk that had been owned by the grandfather, and 2 of the heirs wanted it. And both of them were adamant that they should get it. They had reasons for it. One of them was using, you know, I'm the oldest, so therefore I ought to get it. The other one was, I was grandpa's favorite, I should get it. And it was that kind of scenario. And the way they ended up settling it was that she didn't do this, but there was a court-appointed mediator, and he showed up with the 2 of them to the property and a chainsaw. And he literally walked into the room with them and said, okay, either you guys settle it, or according to the law of the court, I'm cutting this desk in half and you each get half. You pick. And he referred to that as the King Solomon approach.
Yeah.
Back in biblical times, I think King Solomon's approach was offering to cut a baby in half to decide who would get to inherit. And I thought that was a pretty bizarre approach to dealing with a property dispute. But as it worked out just fine, they agreed to visitation rights. And for several years after that, apparently, they moved the desk back and forth between their homes. And then one of them said, you keep the damn desk. I don't like it anyway.
Wow. But yeah, with the stove I was telling you about, I tried to ask this lady, I'm like, is it sentimental to you, or are you looking for the money? Because I figured maybe we could compensate her after the sale. And she was like, it's none of your business. I'm like, okay, so that tells me there's no rational reason you want this stove. You just want to upset everybody. So
Tim, that reminds me, I thought David McCullough was on, but he told us a story when we spoke about this very wealthy family. There was millions of dollars worth of art that he had to liquidate, but they came down to one thing. They came down to who got ownership of the rolling pin that mom used to cook with. And I think he gave like joint custody. One of them got it January through June, and the other got it July through December.
Priceless.
I mean, it seems ridiculous, but it does come down to things like that sometimes. It really does. Yeah, crazy.
Sheila, you have a circumstance?
I was just going to say that I've dealt with this multiple times as well. And one of the things that I think is really important to remember is to not get pulled by any one heir and to stay as neutral as possible. I found that oftentimes they'll try to pull you in and say, oh, look, my sister's doing this or she's doing that. And I'm like Switzerland. I listen, I'm a sounding board, I validate, and then I go back to the intention of what we're looking to do, which is basically, move things along in the process and get the house sold. And just be amicable and kind and listening to everyone.
Yep.
And I see David is on now. David, I just told your rolling pin story. So I told that for you. Yeah. You have anything you want to add? Or we're talking about unusual situations with heirs.
Jim, we already,
Yes, sir.
we already kind of got Sheila started, and I'll get back to David in a minute.
Oh, okay. Yeah, go right ahead. Sure.
Go right ahead.
I've been dealing with this particular PR since 2021. When I first contacted him, he told me, yeah, my POS sister, she tried to put this house up for sale before my mother even died. And now I got to take her to court because she sold the boat, she sold the cars, she sold the jewelry, and she's trying to get the house too. And I'm going to have her arrested and this and that. And this guy, and every month I follow up with him and he's got the same story. Well, I got a court date the end of next month. Yeah, I got a court date the end of next month. And I'm at the point now where all I do is text him because there's no sense in me calling him. I just send him, hey Dave, how's things going? And you through probate yet? Nope, not yet. So it just, and another family, the one sister was the PR. They lived up in New York. Their mother had a beautiful home here right on the Gulf of Mexico in Florida, and couldn't get the other siblings to agree to sell. The house is now covered with mold and just deteriorating, and people are just crazy. You're going to run into all kinds of jobs out there, especially through probate. I'm serious. You will.
It does happen for sure.
Yeah, and that's the unfortunate thing. I mean, some of these people are inheriting the home when they're older, so that maybe they're 65 or 70, and they don't really need the money.
Right.
And that's how I do always try to go, hey, what are you going to do with the money? Your mom or your dad spent their whole life and energy putting, into this house, all their resources, and they're giving it to you because they want your life to be better. What are you going to do with the money? And that's always a little troubling when they have absolutely no idea what they're going to do with it, like pay off their house or go on vacation or do anything. And then, there's not a lot of motivation there. So people are kind of crazy. You think they would want to take that money and do something with it. But again, I always say, hey, all the leads provide you with so many good leads, so many good numbers. Be selective of who you follow up with. You know, if you go, this person's crazy, they have no real desire to have an outcome that's positive, which means sell the house, maybe cut them from the follow-up list is my take on it.
It does happen for sure. David, thanks for stopping in. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself there. And we're just kind of talking about bizarre things that folks have run into. Jim alluded to your rolling pin story, and we're kind of taking topics this week, and this one is crazy things you've run into in terms of people arguing over property. Got any exciting or interesting stories to share?
You know, I was just going to share, as we've gotten to know each other recently, you know, this is what we do. I've divided thousands of estates now. And that rolling pin is a story I tell a lot because it was people who could have, you know, they were all worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And that's what it was going to come down to. And they had lawyered up and they were willing to fight over the rolling pin. And I use the story that you did. I use it a lot. Look, you can go through a lot of legal expenses. You can get it to court. And here's what they're going to do. They're going to say, cut the rolling pin in half, or sell it for the 50 cents it's worth and divide it, you know, you get a quarter each. Those are your options. Or you can flip a coin and decide who gets it, or, you know, some other system. With the difficult, you know, sometimes I'll call it usually I hear, well, there's a black sheep in the family. You know, there's this one problem sibling that's going to hang everything up. I find that I think someone might have been, and someone mentioned like basically being empathetic and listening to them. I'll ask the executor or the trustee, are you comfortable with up to 1 or 2 hours of hand-holding for me to do with that challenging person? A lot of times they just feel unheard and unseen by the rest of the family members. I used to work a lot with a lady named Julie Hall. She was known as the estate lady. She had several books out. And she said when people lose parents, they revert to being 8 and 10-year-old children again emotionally. And so I kind of bear that in mind and try to, like I had one lady, she goes, well, you probably heard I'm the black sheep of the family. I go, are you? Like, how did you get to be that? And then I started this rapport with her, and all of a sudden she's laughing, and she just wanted someone to listen to her story and why she felt like this. And I go, okay, well, let's walk through what the options are. Like, how is this going to help you? Or if we could get it off your plate and have all this behind you sooner, maybe that would be better. What do you think? And, you know, they definitely feel confrontational and at odds with their other family members. So if they feel they even have an empathetic ear that is going to be neutral, I find that gets me through most of these estate settlements better than anything.
Well, it's a lot of that calm, rational voice that, you know, I mean, just listening to the way you said that, and I think that's a lot of the times, you know, people want to be heard for sure. And there's no more emotional time in anybody's life than losing a loved one. And it doesn't bring out the best in us. It often brings out emotions that we've hidden or blocked off and all that. So, you know, we hear a lot about people actually having to be counselors and, you know, armchair psychiatrists and all that sort of stuff. And that's a true statement. And I'm sure that you said that. Jim, what's up, bud?
Oh, I just we have a dozen war stories we could tell, but just kind of a bigger picture observation. Just like people will often, our subscribers will often ask us, you know, who should I call, the executor or the attorney? We always say the executor is authorized to list the real estate. So you want to take a high road and try to have all the family members in harmony. But the reality is, if the person you're speaking to is the executor and they want to sell, you can list it. You don't need the whole family to agree to list it. Let them fight over how to divide the proceeds, but get the property listed.
I was going to say too, if you have an executor or trustee that really has the authority, I find that is amazing, and you can get through it. And in our case, what they often do is they recuse themselves from the process because there's a lot of animosity from the other siblings. How did you get to be the executor? Why are you in charge of everything? Or they're already at odds because they changed the key on the locks on the house and the rest of the family feels locked out, which is what they should have done, but there's the other families. So they'll hire us and say, I've chosen to recuse myself, and we've hired David to serve as administrator over this division of personal property. And that way it kind of gives them an independent third party. And we're finding the trust officers want to do that also, is if you can get that lightning rod of conflict, which can sometimes be the executor, if you could take them out of the equation and then give them a process to get to the end of this, I find it'll get you through it so much faster and agreeably with everyone. And then
Go ahead,
I was going to say,
Bud.
the other thing I have is this concept I call the heir hat, the HEIR hat, for everyone to put it on and imagine being each of the heirs in that situation and giving them permission to, it's okay to feel the way you feel. Like we'll have it where an older brother says, I don't want anything, throw it all away as far as I'm concerned, or sell it. I don't want anything. And now the sisters are mad at him. Oh, you clearly didn't care about our parents. You don't want anything. And then you'll have another sister that says, she was not getting along with her mom when she died, and then now she doesn't want to throw anything away because now everything's sacred that her mom touched, and she wants to get a container and keep everything. And I tell people, let that be okay. And if she's willing to take it all, God bless her. You don't have to deal with where you're going to donate it. Don't get caught up and she's going to get everything and I'm going to get nothing. It's wonderful if she'll take everything.
Yeah, I think David seems like he has a deep understanding of people. And I think that's what you really have to do. You really have to feel where they're coming from. And also a technique that I like to do is reframing. Like David said, this person thought they were the black sheep. I would talk to that person for a little while. And I would say, you seem like a really beautiful person to me. Like you seem really cooperative and very understanding. Like, I don't know how you got this label of black sheep. You seem like a beautiful person, and hey, we're going to get through this. And when you frame somebody in a way that's very positive, I find that they don't want to break that frame. Initially when I make a conversation, I'm like, it sounds like your mom was a beautiful lady, and that's probably why you're such a great person. And then I'll go into my offer. So you got to understand somebody first and foremost, and then you frame them in the way that you want them to behave. And a lot of times they'll hold that frame because you put them on a pedestal or give them esteem. And then they like that feeling, and they want to validate you by acting the way you're framing them.
That's a great perspective, Bud. For sure.
Yeah, but David obviously really understands people.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I want to point out is that, as Jim mentioned earlier, we're going to have David join us in a couple of weeks. We've got a couple of exciting things we're going to talk about next week and the week after, but the latter part of the month, we'll have David back on, and we're going to devote an entire session to just this, to how to work with the personal property in the home, because we've always said that is one of, if not the biggest stumbling block to getting a property ready to sell. And as Sheila pointed out earlier, that's been the stumbling block that she's run into with the same guy for ever and ever and ever. So what I think I want to point out is that we're going to try and help you raise your game and increase your level of professionalism. And we've got a program kind of mapped out, not only from an educational standpoint, but a relationship standpoint, to finding the right people in your market to be able to do that. We often get asked, well, how do I find the right person in my market to do that? We're going to answer that question for you and help you build that leg of your team instantly without a lot of effort to get that done. Coley, I know that you've had your hand up patiently and you unmuted yourself. Go ahead, buddy.
Hey, everybody. So I have a case I'm dealing with now. This is with the two brothers that aren't getting along. So I met with the client and he's willing to engage in mediation with the brother, split everything 50-50. His assumption is the brother expects he's going to take everything and that the other brother is just going to disappear. So the challenge is the brother is living at the house off and on of the decedent's estate. And I can't go to the property right now to like check it out and assess repairs and the value and things of that nature. So I'm talking to the administrator and he's saying, maybe I can try to take some pictures for you, or we try to go over there together. So his priority is this kind of to focus on the mediation piece and then deal with the real estate piece afterwards. My goal is to wholesale the property and get it under contract. So I was wondering if you guys had any ideas of any intermediate steps I can take while trying to get the property under contract, besides the mediation, of course.
Anybody?
Obviously, you could send them a contract contingent on inspections. I mean, but can you even come up with a ballpark of what it's worth without seeing inside?
Yeah, that's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of tough. Like Zillow estimates it for like it's full equity looks like, but it's like close to 800, but still it's hard without getting a look at it first and giving him a fair offer at the very least.
Well, I think the point is subject to that inspection, you can make it whatever you want, again, subject to that inspection. Once you get an involvement in it, once you've gotten a commitment to let you be the person that's involved, you make it very clear that, it could be 800,000, it could be 400,000. If there's a hole in the floor and a sinkhole in the middle of the house, obviously we're not going to get there. So you can get them talking about what they know about the property anyway, and let them potentially even help you with what you think a fair offer is, and say, sure, we'll take it contingent on that based on inspection. That makes sense?
Yeah, so in other words, open that conversation about what do you maybe think it's worth, or how much are you looking for potentially, and then say like, okay, this is what I could potentially offer you subject to inspection, and just have the contract over. He doesn't go to court until I think end of June or July when he gets the letters of testamentary. So
yeah, it's sometimes, we always try to kind of control the dialogue, and maybe if you already knew what it was worth, then you'd take a different approach. But without knowing what it is, kind of negotiation 101 says, well, you might actually be surprised at what they tell you. They may say, well, you said Zillow says 800, and they say, well, I'd like to get, 680 out of it. And it's like, well, tell me why you think it's worth that. Let them do it. Let them do the work. If you don't know the answer, ask the questions. And if you do, and you feel like you've got a good handle on it, then, you're going to try and condition the offer to the number that you're at, but you don't have that. So you got to kind of play the cards that you're dealt.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
I think Tim's right. A lot of people, I think, when they analyze deals, they spend too much time because they get really, really caught up. And again, if you have a due diligence in your purchase agreement, then you always have the ability to renegotiate. I don't personally try to use that as a strategy, but there is definitely people that is their strategy. They're going to come in with a very high number. And I would say there's some national companies that do use that as a, which is shameful because they're supposed to be like the best, people out there, but that is their strategy, coming with a very high offer and then start charge this charge, that charge, and then negotiate during their due diligence. So like I said, I don't like that as a strategy, but that is always a good fallback position. One of the biggest mistakes I've made is not writing more offers, just putting it on the table. No one can say yes.
Always be closing, always
Yeah,
try you don't get something that they can sign, you're never going to get anything signed. Hey,
right.
listen,
They can't say yes if you don't put something on the table.
indeed. This, I know we've already broke your rule very, very quickly in the process here, because we're going to try to get through several of them, but this was a great place to start. I'm going to ask you to move to our next scenario.
No problem. Okay, the next one is a little bit darker. I know this is one that Bruce specifically has dealt with, so it's a bummer he can't be here today, but we'll have to remember to ask him about this next time. But this is definitely a situation that several of our subscribers have mentioned running into and not being sure how to handle it. And that is when they are facing a situation where the executor of the estate has inherited a property where a crime that is essentially a crime scene, and where to even begin in a situation where there's potentially hazardous waste cleanup that needs to be done, or how to market a property where something like that has happened, and so on and so forth.
Jimmy?
Yeah, two mastermind calls I can remember. both a couple of years ago, but one of them was so. And by the way, I think we should preface this whole conversation today. This is like 5 to 10% or less. I mean, these deals, these things hardly ever happen, but when they do, we want you to know how to respond. But we had one probably 2 or 3 years ago. The girl said, I had a great conversation with this girl. She's one of the heirs, but her brother is in prison for killing their parents, and he's the executor. How do I handle that?
Wow.
So, and I remember our advice was go find an attorney, call the probate attorney and get the, I'm pretty sure he's not going to hold up as the executor. I mean, it was just common sense. Get reappointed as the executor. We had another one where about a year ago, where one of our subscribers had a relationship with the executor. She was, living in a battered woman's shelter. She was homeless. She just, her and her brother inherited this $500,000 house, and she found a buyer that was paying full value. And a week before the closing, her brother was living there. His girlfriend snuck in and set his bedroom on fire and killed him. So he said, wow. Now, unbelievable. The girl stepped in and she still got her buyer to close by knocking some ridiculously small amount off the price. I mean, it was like $30,000. And now the girl, obviously the money went into the estate. She was going to get all of the money, but it often horrible situations like that are so overwhelming to the heirs. And it's often just common sense. Both of those situations required good legal counsel, but both of them were pretty easily resolved. That just came to mind, those two extremes.
Anybody else have a crime scene story to share?
I had a suicide. But basically what I remember doing is, and this is like 15 years ago, but I just looked at the law. Did you have to disclose it? And from what I recall, it was not something that was you had to disclose it by law. I think if it had been a murder, then it would have been, you had to disclose it. A suicide, apparently not, if I recall correctly. So I would just say know the law in your state and your local area. Make sure you're, disclosing anything that legally you have to disclose. And of course, remediation, proper remediation. If there's a blood or crime scene, make sure that is taken care of properly, because I'm sure that could be liability down the road.
Colette Myers wants to share. Colette, would you raise your hand? We can unmute you. She just texted that she wanted to share.
I asked her to unmute.
Okay.
Colette, go ahead. Did we lose you? Well, we'll come back to her. I don't know where she went. She clicked to unmute and disappeared. Oh, she's back. There you go. Colette, can you unmute yourself?
She's saying it won't unmute.
Well,
you may have to make sure you acknowledge the recording at the very top of the screen.
All right, well, we'll come back to that. Alyssa, can you maybe work with her a little bit in the tech side and see if we can get her squared away? I have just a quick story that I'll throw out, and it did have bearing on it. One of the people that had a house, this was literally in a town about, I don't know, maybe 20 miles away from where we lived. There was, in fact, a murder. It was a kind of a sad circumstance, and it was a man and wife, elderly, and it was kind of purported to be a mercy killing of the older spouse. And then, because it happened, the son came in and shot the father, who had, in his mind, in theory, did a mercy killing by his wife who had become ill. Came in and he shot his father, And then not too long after that, one of the other siblings followed him in and shot the brother that shot the father. So they had a bunch of people that had shot each other from the same family all in the same house. And a friend of mine actually had the opportunity to buy the house. And it's an old house, kind of in an unusual area, but it was a big, nice house. He ended up buying it, and he turned it into an escape room and capitalized on the fact that all this crazy stuff had happened in it, and had nothing to do with buying it or anything else. He bought it, but instead of flipping it, he initially tried to, and it was so well known that he got it out, and then decided rather than trying to sell it after he did try to sell it and couldn't get a buyer because the notoriety of the house, he capitalized on it and turned it into a murder mystery escape house. So that's making lemonade out of lemons, I guess.
Creative thinking.
True that.
Hey, this one's not so much on the scary side, but I think it is valuable. Recently I went over, like Coley, was talking about going over to the house before you make an offer. So I went over there, and then I met a friend of the person that died. So he's a veteran, but anyway, super cool guy. Got to know him, talked to him, etc. We were talking about the heirs and about how they wanted the cash offer, and they wanted to get almost a full price offer. So they wanted me to assume all the risk, but not actually win financially. And I was like, well, that just shows me that this guy, doesn't really understand business, because he wants a fast 10-day close, but he wants full price. And I'm like, that's not how it works. So the next day after I presented my offer, which they didn't want, I said, hey, I'll bring my contractor back over. You guys can do the work. And, you'll make a lot more money. It's going to take a little bit longer, and you're going to pay for the contractor, but I don't care. So the guy was like, hey, before we go back in the house, I want to let you know, that they were recording the call, or they recording our interaction in the house. And they started asking me about it after you had left. So he's just like, be very careful what you say when you're in the property. And I was like, oh man, hey, thank you. Like, thank you for letting me know that. But just a reminder, you're in somebody else's house. Now with, cameras are so inexpensive, many times you're going to be being recorded. So just, mind your manners, I guess. Know that that's a very distinct possibility.
Yep, for sure. Colette, we had you unmuted. There you go. Go ahead. We got you ready. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was just going to say that we've done several homes where there has unfortunately been a murder or a suicide that has taken place, and or both in some cases. In some cases, it involved children, not just the spouses themselves. So the fundamentals I have found have always applied. Most of the heirs or family members or whoever is left in that scenario, they are really looking for somebody to be a project manager. Obviously, it's a sensitive scenario, and they don't really want to be in the house. I've found a lot of times they have driven over to our office, or they've had us meet them in front of the house. They've handed us the keys, and they have said, we don't really ever want to go in there again. Get us what we need as far as documentation out of the house. Here's the keys. We just don't ever want to step foot in that house again. In some scenarios, they're a little frustrated because if it was a loved one, if it was someone like a sister or, an aunt or a mother, and it was the husband that caused the death, they usually end up being the executor for the person who did the murdering as well. And that is a very heightened situation for them because they are really frustrated by that. And oftentimes they don't really want to be the executor for the brother-in-law or the family member that caused the deaths, but they are. So in those situations, we actually set up a vendor list that we have on file specifically for homes where that is a a scenario, and we just sort of move everything into a project management situation for them, give them a timeline, and just set all the vendors up. And we typically run everything through whoever the probate attorney is on there. That way we are communicating with the probate attorney, we're communicating with the family members once a week, and we will just remediate the house and usually sell the house as is. And it typically goes to an investor, but because it's the Houston area here, it'll go to end users a lot too.
Great. Thanks for that. That's good feedback. And, you know, every circumstance like that, it does matter what happened. You know, if it, like you said, if there was a child involved, you know, there's a stigma attached to that. And all of these things matter. People attach, you know, sentimental and emotional issues to physical things all the time. And it's just something to be aware of. Hey, Liz, you got another topic for us?
Yes, I do. This next one is one that is mostly applicable to our rural areas, and that would be when you are dealt with a property that has animals that need to be rehomed, which can cause logistical and sometimes emotional challenges as well. So how do we handle situations like that where it's a farm with, you know, hundreds of livestock or maybe potentially even more exotic animals like that?
First of all, you don't call my wife because we don't have any more room right now. That's the first thing I would say. For sure, you don't do that. And then after that, we'll take some other options, but don't call my wife. Roger, what you got there, bud? Got to unmute yourself, pal. Okay, Roger, you have to, if you can figure that out, that would be great. Whenever you're ready, I'll kind of keep an eye on the screen there. You have to look at the meeting being recorded and probably agree that you understand that before it'll work. Lissa, if you can work with Roger in chat and see if you can get him squared away, that'd be great. Anyone else about animals? I've got a couple, but I'd hear from somebody else. So I'll just add this only because my comment about my wife was not an unreal comment. We have a lot of animals that have gathered here over the years with goats and chickens and dogs and horses and all kinds of things. So we sort of have that. But I think one of the things that's key, particularly if you're operating in a rural area, you're going to run into that. And it's always good to have, you know, relationships within the community to people, not necessarily from a sheltering standpoint or anything else, but, you know, who would be interested in potentially buying animals that, particularly if it's cattle or, you know, commercial animals, there are always people in the local market to do that. And it's good to have them at your disposal. More importantly, the reason that it's good is that instantly you have the ability to say, well, I can refer that to my guy that, you know, buys beef cattle, or I can refer that to the lady that is the person who always picks up the chickens and loves to do that and has lots of them, and, you know, lots of good stories like that. And these are the things that, you know, Ken always talks about building rapport with people. It's that kind of rapport that makes it work. So having that as part of your arsenal, it's just one more thing that better prepares you for those conversations when they come up. Roger, I see you got yourself unmuted. What's up, bud?
Thank you. Colette, I really appreciate your testimony today. I have found another percent to add on my my services by providing project management services in addition to regular real estate stuff. I think that's a great value added, and I think it should be added. So thank you so much for that additional percent to my probate stuff. Number two, Jim, I would like for you to send me your contact information. I contacted the local the local vendor for carrying transitions, And he said, no, nobody gets to hear the marketing guy or see the marketing guy. We're all instructed. He said, send me your guys' contact information, some additional links and stuff about the operation. And you've got all of the business that we come up with that people contact us for anything else. Because I've already sent him three jobs. That's all I got, guys. If y'all like to keep me short on this, and I'll sign off.
Roger, that's the shortest you've ever gone. And what are you up to now in your percent? Are you up to about 12% with all the services you offer?
He already muted himself back up there, but
What's that?
I said he muted himself again. So
okay, that's all right. Just having fun with Roger.
Hey, Roger, the other thing, Al, you were a little bit late jumping on today. I saw you probably were out working with people, but in a couple of weeks, come back and join us for sure. And we're going to be specifically talking about how to distribute property and all that. I think you'll find that real interesting based on some of the stuff you just said. Anything else about livestock and animals? We've got about 10 minutes left on the call. It's been an interesting topic. The one thing I'll point out again, back to what Jim said, is that, realize, folks, that we're kind of talking about almost a fun topic, and I don't mean that in a flippant way, but an interesting topic this week. These are, the tiny single-digit percentages that you ever run into bizarre things like this. It's just always kind of interesting to have a different perspective on what crazy things you can hear. And I think the real value that you ought to take away from this is realizing that even when it's very, very rare, that even the rarest thing you're going to find, somebody else has probably seen it, dealt with it, heard it, and has an answer that worked for them. And so you don't need to worry about it, and realize that it's just a conversation. If somebody says to you, a tree fell on my house, well, you're going to be sympathetic and all that. Not very often that a tree falls on somebody's house. So it's an unusual circumstance. Just don't be too concerned about that. It's another form of the lightning strike. Let's say you got another one. We've got time for one more.
Well, I would say with the livestock, among most things, don't be afraid to fail. If somebody's like, hey, I got 12 horses I got to sell, I'd be like, hey, no problem. Like, I got that. I got a buyer for you. Like, I know just the person. And I'd get on the phone. I'd just start calling, everybody in the neighborhood, the local farms, the feed stores, anybody I could think of that might buy these horses. And then I would say, if you're not going to buy them, who would you refer me to that might buy horses? There's so many resources. If you're just willing to take on the potential risk of failing, you're probably going to succeed. So, just like having your clean out crew, we hear it on the show all the time. Oh, I don't have a clean out crew. Well, let your fingers do the dialing and find a clean out crew. It's everything's easy if you're going to put the effort into doing it. So just have that confidence in yourself to bet that you can actually handle the problem.
Yeah, that's kind of the whole value first premise, is that if you're approaching this from what can I take off your plate, it's simple stuff. Where's the pain? Alleviate the pain. If it's something they can't do, don't know how to do, and you're willing to say that you can, you can get it done. Every problem has a solution. You're just a creative problem solver. So if you're willing to take on the burden of saying, I can do that, like Ken said, kind of what's the worst thing that could happen is, well, hey, I'm really sorry I couldn't find anybody to take the horses, but I'm going to keep trying. Let's talk about something else. We'll get through that. Let's move on. And, there are always ways to kind of move that down the road a little bit. Belinda, you've got your hand up. Let's hear what you have to say there.
Okay,
Go
can
ahead.
you hear me? Can you hear me?
You bet.
Okay. This isn't like a weird case or anything like that, but along the lines of what you all were just talking about in terms of just, if you don't know an answer, to go out and let your fingers do the walking. But I wanted to ask a question. I have a case where the PR called me, and the property actually was owned through, God, I can't think of the name now, but the ownership is where you actually is partitioned. So it's a father and a son that own the property, and it's the type of ownership where tenants in common. where you can, the father passed away, but his share can go to whoever, down to the state line. But the other son still owns, a portion of the property. So come to find out, there's another son out there floating around somewhere, and could be an heir. The son that actually owns part of the property is trying to figure out how does he go about either being able to stay in the property, or if he has to sell it, and if so, how long he has to look for this other sibling that's out there. And I'm wondering, one of the options I gave him was, I think he could do what's called a motion for petition, and where they can, the courts can kind of divvy up the property and give what's, with the son who's already on the property, what he's supposed to have, and then if the other son pops up, then he gets, I guess, the other portion. But are there any other ideas how to deal with that situation? Because I don't know how long a person has to look for, say, a missing sibling. And this is somebody he hasn't had contact with for, a number of years, but he knows the sibling is out there. He's already done notice to creditors and things like that.
Isn't that in your marketplace? Is there an attorney of record on this case?
No, he does not have an attorney. So what I did do was to look down my list from my leads and see who's doing quite a few probates and it's close to him. And I gave him a list of 3 attorneys for him to call so that he can, because I told him you're going to need a real estate attorney or either a state attorney that, have done these types of deals before. So I looked for an estate attorney that does quite a bit of business. Because I would think that if they do a lot of business, they may have run into this situation, not one time, maybe 2 or 3 times. So that's what my remedy was. I'm going to follow up with him in about another day or 2 and ask him if he got the chance to call, and what the results were. And that's kind of how I build my list too. When I don't have a vendor, I tell them, give me, maybe an hour or 2, and I go look on, I go and Google it and, do a couple of other checkpoints and then give them a list of these people. Call them back maybe a few days later and see how it worked out. If it works out fine, that person or that vendor goes on my list. That's how
Well, when they get an attorney involved in the case, one of the things you want to do is also go to school on that conversation so that you know the answer to that question the next time it comes up about that declaration of heirs and what limits they have to go to and what the legal time limit is for an heir to present. And that's not a national answer. It's a local answer in most cases. So your attorney in that market should be able to answer that question for you. And it would be important to get that specifically from that attorney to do that. Roger, do you have something about that, bud?
You missed an opportunity to introduce yourself to an attorney. I would go specifically to the attorney's office and ask him after you find out that he's doing probate, and introduce yourself. And you would have if you give him a client and he's interested in doing it, he will restart referring business back to you.
Yeah. Good job there, bud. That's a great answer and a great, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Short and sweet.
Okay.
Yeah. You're bringing in business.
Very, very good. That's cool. Guys, we got 3 more minutes. If anybody has anything, I don't think we'll take another topic on because we've kind of gotten through them. This was an interesting day, and we just kind of thought we'd take an interesting approach to finding things that are difficult to try to get some additional responses out of you folks to kind of find out what's been going on with you and all that. And I hope you found our interesting answers to at least be interesting and enjoy some stories that you can now kind of wrap around some things that you can talk to people about. Hey, one of the things that I heard of was, in a circumstance this, now you've got some stories to relate. So part of this is what we refer to as lore building. You're building your lore that you can share with other people. And it's important to have that experiential data instead of, faking it till you make it. You've got a common threaded experience here that you've shared with everybody on this call. Now you know some of the things that your companions and compatriots have gone through, and you need to incorporate that into your thought process. But that's kind of important to do that. If anybody doesn't have anything else, Jimmy, I think we're going to get out of here on time today, bud.
Yeah, Tim, I was going to say, to summarize almost exactly what you said, I was also going to say it's highly unlikely anything we talked about will ever happen to anybody on this call. But people will come to you with what they think are equally dire emergencies, and being able to share worse situations that have happened to other people probably will make them feel a whole lot better. well, yeah, I understand you're stressed, but gosh, I heard this story from one of my colleagues, or this happened, or that happened, and all of a sudden I think it'll ease their fears that whatever they're going through could be a lot worse. So
I think sometimes just spending time with people goes a long way. Like I literally, I'll get somebody on the phone and I find they're like ready to talk, and I'll sit there for an hour because I know there's a deal ready to be had. And I know like I'm spending more time with them than any other realtor is going to spend with them.
Yeah.
And that's them telling me stories and I'm telling them stories. And you know, like they talk about the 5 love languages, and I don't know what they all are, but one of them is time. So having stories, keeping somebody's attention it's very important. You know, again, I win a lot of sales by just being able to spend more time than anybody else. So saying that, I like spending time with you guys too. I appreciate all of you.
And Ken, they often say, okay, I'll list if you just get out of here. You know, 4 hours is enough.
I guess I get that all the time. Please leave here. Yeah.
Hey, Jessica,
Tim,
I want you to, if you would, just say what you said there in chat for the people who aren't seeing that chat. Go ahead.
Sure. Because we were talking about Google searches, and we just want to just remind you that you want to be searchable as well. So when someone's looking up probate services, you want to be the one that they find. So it's really important to have some online presence. You know, probate websites are really great, but just a website that really enhances your services that you can offer, because you can list out those services. So when someone is looking for probate services, they can come to your website. They can see that you also are in connection with other vendors like lawn care or contractors or clean out crews. They can see that you already have these established vendors. And so you're kind of like the one-stop shop, that you have those connections already. So already having some online presence, because you also want to be searchable. If you're not searchable, someone else is. So you don't want someone to overlook you just because you don't have online presence. So just remember how important it is for online presence, because we are searching for those services that we just talked about earlier on, you know, on the podcast, but you too want to be searchable.
Yep, that's the person that you want to be found by. Most importantly, you know, if they're looking for all of those sorts of things. And, you know, back to Roger's point, Roger makes a great point about the menu of services that he offers to people. And, you know, having that all delineated on your site, not only can you have it there, but most importantly, you know, if you build around it and you literally optimize for that from a searching standpoint, it's important. Steve made a point, one of our new coaches, that he got a hit yesterday from a gutter cleaning company who Googled for assistance. And, you know, it's that kind of stuff. You know, you've got to be out there, you've got to be seen, you've got to be that person that's in your market. We talk about being the go-to person for this niche in your market. And that's the same thing that's important there. And we're going to be talking next week probably about divorce a little bit. We're going to be introducing the product side of that and the things that we've kind of wrapped around it. And we're going to have the same scenario there, give you some tips about how to build an appropriate team. A lot of the same team that you have now will apply to the divorce side, but even more so in regard to dealing with divorces, you're going to be dealing with, without question, you're going to be dealing with a lot of raw emotion that you're not necessarily always dealing with in probate. In divorce, you're almost always going to be dealing with that, unless it's been a separation that's been going on for a long time. And that's typically not the case. So, because we're typically giving it to you when we roll it out on filing. And so it's pretty fresh. And the people that are there, you know, I'll go back to kind of where we started with this about David. You know, you become that voice of reason that can help them get through a really tough time. And so we'll be talking some more about that going forward, but it's always important to keep that team there and make sure that you've got it all listed on your site, and we'll help you build all that stuff out. And that's kind of a commercial for what we do. We don't make these pitch fests and always trying to sell things, but you know, we have the best leads in the business, and we try to provide the best support mechanism wrapped around it, which these support calls or these mastermind podcasts are part of. Jimmy, let's take us home, buddy.
All right, another great call. Thanks to all of you. I want to thank everybody who showed up today. Great attendance. I want to particularly thank Bill and Eileen and Sheila and David and Coley and Colette and Ken and Tim and Jessica. Great participation. A lot of people that actively participated. And as always, I want to challenge each of you, take one idea that inspired you on this call, go out and put it into practice, and please come back next Thursday and share your results with the group. Same time next week, guys. Have a great week. Talk to you soon. Take care.